Welcome to Lesson 4 of Story-Based English. In this lesson, two hikers named Mia and Ben find an old cabin in the mountains and discover traces of the family who once lived there. By the end of this lesson, you will know 10 new vocabulary words, and you will understand how to use used to for talking about past habits and situations that are no longer true. Let's explore. Here is our first sentence. Listen carefully. Mia and Ben stumbled across an old cabin while hiking through the overgrown mountain trails. Let me read that again. Mia and Ben stumbled across an old cabin while hiking through the overgrown mountain trails. All right, let's start with this first sentence. First, let's look at the phrase stumbled across. To stumble across something means to find it unexpectedly, by accident. It is very similar to stumbled upon, which we learned in Lesson 2. Both mean the same thing, an accidental discovery. Mia and Ben were not looking for the cabin. They just found it while hiking. Now, the second word is overgrown. When a place is overgrown, plants, grass, and weeds have grown wild and covered it. Nobody has cut the grass or cleared the bushes. An overgrown trail is hard to walk on because nature has taken over. Over plus grown. Things have grown over what was once there. Now, this sentence sets the scene for our grammar point. Right now, the cabin is abandoned and overgrown. But what was it like before? What did the people who lived here used to do? That question, what life used to be like, is exactly what used to helps us talk about. Let's discover it in the next sentence. Now let's step inside the cabin and see what we can learn about the people who used to live here. Here is sentence 2. A large stone fireplace showed that a family used to gather here on cold winter evenings. One more time. A large stone fireplace showed that a family used to gather here on cold winter evenings. Oh, this is such a warm image. Let's look at the word fireplace. A fireplace is the open area in a wall where you make a fire to heat a room. In older homes, the fireplace was the center of the house. The family would sit around it for warmth and light. Fire plus place, the place where the fire goes. Simple and logical. Now, the second word is gathering. Actually, here the verb is gather. To gather means to come together in one place. When a family gathers, everyone comes together. A social gathering is when people meet and spend time together. Now here is our grammar in action. A family used to gather here. This tells us about a past habit. The family regularly gathered around the fireplace. They did it again and again on many cold evenings. But they do not do it anymore because the cabin is abandoned now. That is the key to used to. It describes repeated actions or habits in the past that are no longer happening. Not a single event, a habit, a routine, something that happened regularly. Structure. Subject plus used to plus the base form of the verb. Used to gather, used to sit, used to cook. Always the base form after used to. Does that make sense? Wonderful. Beautiful. Let's continue exploring the cabin and learn more about the family who used to live here. Here is sentence 3. There used to be a wooden fence around the property, but it did not use to keep the livestock from escaping. Let me read it once more. There used to be a wooden fence around the property, but it did not use to keep the livestock from escaping. Oh, this sentence is very interesting for grammar. But first, vocabulary. Let's look at the word fence. A fence is a barrier made of wood or metal that goes around a property to separate it from the outside. Gardens have fences, farms have fences. In this story, the cabin had a wooden fence around it. And the second word is livestock. Livestock are animals kept on a farm for food, milk, or other products. Cows, sheep, chickens, goats, these are all livestock. The family who lived here used to keep livestock. Live plus stock. Stock means a supply or collection. Livestock is your stock of live animals. Now, the grammar. This sentence introduces something very important, the negative form of used to. Look, it did not used to keep the livestock from escaping. When we make used to negative, we say subject plus did not used to plus base verb. Notice that used becomes use without the D. Why? Because did already carries the past tense. We do not need to mark the past twice. So, I used to swim. Negative, I did not use to swim. Question, did you use to swim? In the negative and question forms, used drops the D and becomes use. This is a detail that many learners miss, but you will not miss it now. Can you make a negative sentence? How about, I did not used to like coffee? Try it. Okay, quick review. We have learned that used to talks about past habits that are no longer true. Can you remember the negative form? Right, did not used to, without the D on use. And we have great vocabulary. Overgrown means covered in wild plants, fireplace is where the fire goes, and livestock are farm animals. Excellent, let's continue. Here is sentence 4. Inside a drawer, they found a worn-out journal that described the daily routines of the family. One more time. Inside a drawer, they found a worn-out journal that described the daily routines of the family. Now this is an exciting discovery. Let's look at worn out. When something is worn out, it has been used so much that it is old, damaged, and barely usable. Worn-out shoes have holes. A worn-out book has torn pages. This journal is worn out because it was used for many years. Worn out is a compound adjective, just like absent-minded from Lesson 1. 2 words connected by a dash working as one adjective. And the second word is journal. A journal is like a diary, a book where you write about your daily life, thoughts, and experiences. A journal is more personal than a notebook. It contains the writer's feelings and observations. Now, the grammar connection. The journal describes daily routines. Routines are things you do regularly, habits. And what do we use to talk about past habits? Exactly, used to. The journal entries probably say things like, we used to wake up at 5 in the morning. We used to feed the livestock. We used to sit by the fireplace. And here is a wonderful moment to connect back to earlier vocabulary. Remember the word fireplace from sentence 2 and livestock from sentence 3. The journal probably describes the family gathering around that fireplace and taking care of that livestock. All the vocabulary from earlier sentences comes together in this journal. Wonderful. The journal is like a window into the past. Let's read what it says. Here is sentence 5. The journal said the family used to cherish every sunrise, something they could never do in the busy city. One more time. The journal said the family used to cherish every sunrise, something they could never do in the busy city. Oh, this is beautiful. Let's look at the word cherish. To cherish something means to hold it very dear, to value it deeply. When you cherish a memory, you treasure it. You keep it in your heart as something precious. The family used to cherish every sunrise. They loved watching the sun come up. It was special to them. Now the grammar. Let's think about used to versus past simple. The family used to cherish every sunrise. This tells us about a repeated habit, something they did regularly. But what if we said, the family cherished the sunrise one morning? That would be past simple, a single event, one specific morning. So, used to equals repeated past habit. Past simple can be either a habit or a single event. But when we specifically want to emphasize the habitual nature and the fact that it is no longer true, we choose used to. Here is a test. I used to drink coffee every morning versus I drank coffee this morning. Can you hear the difference? The first one is a habit that stopped. The second is a single event today. This distinction is very important for B1 learners, and you are getting it. One final sentence. Let's see how Mia and Ben feel about what they have discovered. And here is our final sentence. Mia smiled and said that places like this cabin would always carry the legacy of the people who used to call them home. One more time. Mia smiled and said that places like this cabin would always carry the legacy of the people who used to call them home. What a perfect ending. Let's look at the word legacy. A legacy is what someone leaves behind after they are gone. It can be physical things like a cabin or a journal, but it can also be ideas, traditions, or memories. The family left a legacy. The cabin, the journal, the fireplace, the stories. Even though the people are gone, their legacy remains. Think of it this way. What legacy would you like to leave? What would you want people to remember about you? Now, the grammar. Notice the phrase, used to call them home. This is another beautiful use of used to. The people used to call this place home. It was once their home. Now it is not anyone's home anymore. Used to captures that change perfectly. But I also want to introduce one more idea. Would for past habits. Look at places like this would always carry the legacy. Here, would describes something that happens regularly. Would can also be used for past habits, like used to. The family would gather around the fire. They would wake up with the sunrise. The difference? Used to works for both habits and past states. Would only works for repeated actions, not states. You can say, I used to live here, but you cannot say, I would live here, for a past state. So, used to is safer and more flexible. Would adds a nostalgic storytelling feel. Both are useful at B1. Now let's listen to the entire story one more time. Mia and Ben stumbled across an old cabin while hiking through the overgrown mountain trails. A large stone fireplace showed that a family used to gather here on cold winter evenings. There used to be a wooden fence around the property, but it did not used to keep the livestock from escaping. Inside a drawer, they found a worn-out journal that described the daily routines of the family. The journal said the family used to cherish every sunrise, something they could never do in the busy city. Mia smiled and said that places like this cabin would always carry the legacy of the people who used to call them home. Beautiful. And that is a wrap for Lesson 4. You did an incredible job. Let's look at everything you learned in this lesson. Vocabulary. You learned 10 new words. Stumbled across, overgrown, fireplace, gathering, fence, livestock, worn out, journal, cherish, and legacy. 10 words. Grammar. We mastered used to for past habits and situations. You can now talk about how things were in the past and how they have changed. Keep up the great work. Now head over to the quiz section to test yourself. Then try the role play. You can role play as a visitor to the cabin or the family who once lived there, using used to describe your life. See you in Lesson 5, where we will find a lost letter with a heartfelt message. Bye for now.